Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. It's the 10th day of August in the year of our Lord 2022. I'm at Studio North, Winterfell. And I hate to be the first to tell you, but there's a new virus in China. And I've been reading the Guardian story and the Bloomberg story on it this morning. It's called LAV-V, L-A-Y, capital V, LAV virus, which is short for Langya Henipavirus. First detected in the northeastern provinces of the Chinese Communist-governed state. There are dozens of cases. No report yet on human-to-human transmission. No report yet on lethality. But why would we believe anything the Chinese Communist Party tells us anyway? I don't. You don't. All I know is if it's big enough to make it to the Guardian and Bloomberg. Nearly 36 people in China have been sickened by a newly identified virus from the same family as the deadly Nipah and Hendra viruses, though there is no evidence the pathogen can be transmitted from person to person. LAV-V, L-A-V, like Frito-Lay, LAV virus. Okay, just mark down the date, August 10th. Hugh Hewitt told me about it. That's what I did. You heard about coronavirus from me back when we called it the Wuhan virus. First, you heard it condemned first, warned about here first, and so I keep my eye on this stuff, especially when it's in China, because none of the information is any good. They're lying. You would think that the Chinese communists would begin to wonder about Xi Jinping. He's spending all this money shaking his fist at and rattling China's saber towards Taiwan, and he's got rampant coronavirus. He's got an economy on the brink. It's going to fall apart in China pretty soon, and he can't control his crazy scientists. And I do believe that they've done so many weird gain-of-function research, some of it with our help, that we're in big trouble. I also think, do you really want to be in the United States with Tony Fauci leading another virus response? Here it is, 3 years later, 2.5 years later, and Dr. Fauci is still there. You want Joe Biden to be giving those press conferences? Joe Biden who can't get his jacket on? Oh, well. When we come back from break, I'll tell you about the economic news of the day. There's only one story. It's the search raid warrant on Mar-a-Lago. Washington Post. Trump claims political persecution after FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. Let's play cut number one. Or not. Cut
Everything
number one.
This corrupt establishment is doing to me is all about preserving their power and control over the American people. They want to damage you in any form, but they really want to damage me so I can no longer go back to work for you. And I don't think that's going to happen.
All right, so I have a front Washington Post lead editorial today in the paper, which a few people still read, like the old people in Washington still read it. They don't read it online, but it's on the top of the landing page over at Washington Post. An editorial that President Trump should release the warrant. He should just release the warrant and then demand that Merrick Garland release the underlying affidavit, which is sealed. I talked to a former federal prosecutor and district court judge yesterday. The former president definitely has the warrant. 4 corners of the warrant will tell what they were after, and it will tell you what they were seeking to enforce. And I'm coming to the conclusion, given the silence and the mummy's tomb at Justice, that they really were basing this entirely on the Presidential Records Act and classified information laws, which just makes me think, what a put-up job. In any event, the editorial I write concludes, hey, Trump ought to release the warrant. That's the headline. You'll find it over at WashingtonPost.com. It concludes, even Republicans who might oppose another presidential run by Trump are aware that this search could compel him to run sooner and harder than he might otherwise have planned. Another attempted takedown of the most investigated president in history could leave the former president stronger politically with his base than before and personally angry enough to run again, even if he'd been toying not to do so. Lindsey Graham said to me yesterday, just be careful what you wish for. This guy, he's been the most blessed person in the world in terms of his enemies. Be careful for what you wish for indeed, I conclude. If the investigation misses and sputters out in another fruitless witch hunt in the endless movie of Get Trump, the Trump haters will have missed again. And 45 will start planning on being 47. My Washington Post editorial today. And I just think it's on the mark, and that's why there are thousands of angry comments like buzzing bees around it. And it went up last night at 6:30 p.m. and it's already got thousands of comments because people can't believe anyone objects to this. Here's the Wall Street Journal editorial. Well, first let me play a little audio because there's a lot of great audio on this yesterday. Let's start with Senator Rick Scott on Fox Business with Dagan McDowell, cut number 8.
Well, first off, it makes you mad. I mean, this is their rate. This is unprecedented. A former president, potential opponent to Biden in 24, his house gets raided. We know the Biden administration targets their opponents. Merrick Garland's targets Democrat opponents. Here's what needs to happen today. Separately, Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray, Joe Biden need to do press conference, take all questions, explain why they're doing what they're doing, what each of them knew when. This should scare every American until we get answers. You should have unbelievable concern. I got more phone calls last night.
Go over to Ted Cruz, cut number 13.
That's exactly right. What we've got to do is win control of the House and Senate so that we have the authority to engage in oversight. You know, it was interesting. The director of the FBI was there for one round of questions. At the end of the round of questions, we're supposed to have a second round. He said, no, I got a plane to catch. I'm sorry, I got to go. He didn't want another round of questions. As Chuck Grassley observed, wait a second. You've got your own plane. The FBI has a private jet just for you, so your plane to catch is you just don't want to have any more investigation. We need serious oversight. We need accountability. The people who have been political and partisan need to be fired, and if they've broken the law, they need to be prosecuted.
Ted Cruz is absolutely right. Let's hear Marco Rubio say the same thing, cut number 10.
You know, an FBI raid looking for supposed classified documents is a ridiculous alibi. Unlike anyone else in the federal government, no president can be guilty of illegally handling classified information because the president has complete and final authority to decide whether something's classified or not. The truth is, this raid wasn't about documents. This raid was about trying to disqualify a likely future election opponent, about trying to intimidate Republicans who oppose the left, and about creating a distraction from Biden's failures and the radicalism of the Democratic Party that he leads. Guys,
Rubio's right. Let's go listen to Lindsey Graham on with Jesse Waters, cut 27.
Well, what we need is the predicate for the warrant because we're talking 90 days before a midterm election, right? 90 days. We're talking about raiding the home of the former president of the United States, the most likely nominee of anybody on the planet to be running in 2024. Is it plausible the FBI would open up an investigation of Donald Trump without merit? Hell yeah, they've done it before. So on air,
Lindsey said that on our show, and so he said again. Let's go to Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He'll be on the show with me a little bit later today on the CBS Early Show, cut number 7.
Well, we've had the FBI before. The Judiciary Committee just in the last 2 weeks trying to figure out why they do what they do. And there's been lots of questions before this raid about whether or not the FBI is doing their job apolitical. And we don't know the answer to that question yet. This is probably
about the FBI.
This is going to raise more questions, in my opinion. We need to let this play out and see exactly what happens, but we should all have been stunned.
So you know what the Democrats said? Paul Begala is my friend. I go out, the Washington Speakers Bureau sends Paul and I out to do a bunch of events together. I always enjoy being with him. He's always wrong, but he's always funny. But yesterday he said this on CNN, cut number 23.
Well, the theory is, we must not offend the Trump base. We must not trigger. You know what triggers the Trump base? Everything. Sunrise, sunset, Sesame Street for real, Sesame Street, Dr. Zeus. Everything pisses those people off.
Hey, stop for that. What did Paul do? He diverted from the topic of raiding a potential candidate. When I come back, I'll play you Christopher Wray. This has really, I was so glad to be on Fox News when this happened. It said Blockbuster never happened before. It's unprecedented. I urge you to go and read the Wall Street Journal editorial. I'll get to that later. I want you to call me, 1-800-520-1234, 1-800-520-1234. There's other news. I'll make sure that you're up to speed with any breaking news, as I always do. But the story of the day remains the story of Monday night when I was on over at Special Report. It remains the story I covered all day yesterday and the story I'm covering all day today. A former president of the United States home residence was rifled through. And by the way, the 87,000 IRS agents that the Senate just voted to hire, the Democrats just voted to hire, they can do the same thing to you using IRS authority. So that's what you got. Vote. Do not vote for one Democrat anywhere. Vote for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. Vote for J.D. Vance in Ohio. Vote for Joe O'Dea in Colorado. Adam Laxalt in Nevada. Tiffany Smith in Washington State. And, of course, Herschel Walker in Georgia. Do not vote for one Democrat. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Congressman Mike Gallagher represents Wisconsin's 8th Congressional District and home of the Packers. Or are you prepared to talk about P cubed, Congressman Gallagher?
Prepared to talk about what, Hugh?
P cubed.
P cubed. Oh, gosh. I don't know where this is going. I'm sure it's an elaborate setup for some anti-Packers screed. Go ahead.
The peyote-powered Packers. That's what I want to talk about, the peyote-powered Packers. So what did you make about Aaron Rodgers going to the Amazon and popping peyote to power the Packers?
I'm all for it, Hugh. I'm vehemently against drug use. Let me make that clear. But, you know, if Aaron Rodgers wants to expand the limits of his mind and thereby continue to win MVP awards, you know, on some level, I have to be in favor of that.
Just remember, P cubed. You could start a T-shirt. P cubes unite. The peyote-powered Packer. All right, Congressman, let's talk about something serious. Ron Johnson got renominated last night. You got renominated last night. Any upsets, anything interesting happen in Wisconsin elections last night?
Well, I mean, the governor primary was coming down to the wire. It was close. Tim Michels prevailed over Rebecca Kleefisch. Rebecca Kleefisch was the former lieutenant governor endorsed by former Governor Scott Walker. Tim Michels is a businessman who was endorsed by former President Trump. And so that was a very hard-fought primary. Tim Michels prevailed, and so now we have the task of uniting the party behind Tim Michels in order to oust Governor Evers, who has been a terrible governor and who has vetoed any number of common-sense conservative legislation. So that was really the race everybody was watching. You know, there were a lieutenant governor's race where a state senator from my district, who I know well, prevailed. But other than that, it was mostly the governor's primary that people were focused on.
So, look, you just won an election. You got a congressional reelection coming up. I just posted on Twitter, until Monday night, I thought the fall elections would turn on inflation, recession, crime, the collapse of public education, open border, and our collapse in Afghanistan a year ago. Now add in abuse of power by Team Biden. People are angry, very angry. I also point out the 87,000 new IRS agents, which you will vote against this Friday or Saturday, they can do to every American what the FBI did to former President Trump on Monday night. Am I right about that?
I think you're right. I might put the FBI raid under a broader theme of lack of accountability that really predates what we saw at Mar-a-Lago, right? I think there's a growing sense of unaccountability from the federal government that connects to the fact that nobody seems to have been held accountable for the shameful surrender in Afghanistan. Nobody as yet has been held accountable for signing the letter suggesting that the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation and thereby abusing, in some meaningful sense, their post as a former high-level intelligence official. Nobody's been held accountable for the lies and the cover-up about the origins of the coronavirus pandemic and effectively regurgitating Chinese Communist Party propaganda or using American taxpayer dollars to fund dangerous research at Wuhan. Go further back. I mean, the thing that first kind of, I think, altered, if not shattered, part of my epistemological framework about the federal government was when I came into Congress in 2017, I obviously came from a defense and intelligence background. I never would have thought it would have been possible that the highest levels of the FBI could have abused the FISA process. Because, of course, my view of the FBI is shaped by buddies I have, who I served with in uniform, who are rank and file FBI agents who are patriots, hardworking, smart guys, and who I think do represent the vast majority of people in the FBI. But clearly there's a problem with leadership. And that, I mean, the way in which the Steele dossier, which was total bogus, was weaponized against the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, that was such a massive breach of trust. I think for a lot of us, that shattered the way we viewed federal law enforcement agencies, and now we sort of see this as connected to that. So I think here in Wisconsin, people are crying out for accountability. And let's face the facts, Hugh. we're going to be in divided government even if there is a red wave come November, right? President Biden's going to veto a lot of conservative legislation. So what can we do rather than just twiddling our thumbs, awaiting the coming of some messianic presidential figure in 2024? Well, we can use the power of the majority. We can use our subpoena power. We can use the power of investigations and good old-fashioned oversight to start holding some of these agencies and individuals accountable, and thereby start ourselves on the path to getting the public to trust the FBI, to trust the intelligence community, again, for there to be a more productive relationship, because I fear that we strayed off that path, and your average American, certainly here in Northeast Wisconsin, is getting disgusted with all this stuff.
You know, Congressman, you are an intel officer. You're on the Intelligence Committee. You're a Marine. A good friend of mine, Mel Spees, Major General, United States Marine Corps, retired, sent me a note yesterday. Just a factoid: 87,000 IRS agents represents half of the standing United States Marine Corps, more than half of the Marine Corps' strength. They just expanded the IRS by more than half of the Marine Corps. It's kind of a stunning thing to do in the middle of a recession when Americans distrust their federal government. And what you just went through, the litany, goes back. The first act is the non-prosecution of Hillary Clinton for the destruction of classified information. No search warrant ever. Terms of her interview, her lawyer was present. All of that caused this original rupture. And the Andrew McCabe, Jim Comey, Peter Strzok FBI was supposed to be reformed by Christopher Wray. I thought Wray was a looted clerk and I think he's been captured by the agency. I think they run circles around him. And the DC agency, I would basically wash everyone out of DC and bring in the guys and the gals from the field, because I just don't trust any of them.
100%. I will say this, Hugh. We are on the intelligence community actively working on a aggressive FISA reform effort, which we will try to tackle in the next Congress. Obviously, it's a very difficult thing. There are disagreements within the party on it, but I think we can strike that balance of still giving certain agencies the powers they need to go after bad guys, which you do need, while demanding greater accountability and transparency and respect for due process and things like that. You mentioned the 87,000 IRS agents. If you go on the Army website, you can check me on this. 90,000 is the size of a field army. So we're basically putting in place a field army's worth of IRS agents. And if you think that's innocuous, well, then you've never been audited. I mean, I was rereading, Kimberly Strassel actually had a great book about how, called The Intimidation Game, about a decade ago, which documented the abuses of power here in Wisconsin, where overzealous prosecutors went after conservatives, did raids in the middle of the night, targeting members of the Club for Growth simply because of their politics. And we got a preview of what's happening right now. In addition to Trump being raided at Mar-a-Lago, a colleague of mine, Scott Perry, allegedly had his phone seized by FBI agents. The whole thing stinks, Hugh. And the American people are fed up with it.
If we go back, and again, you're a PhD, so you may not know much about the Declaration of Independence, but in the Declaration of Independence, there's the glorious language we know, but then Jefferson laid out what is an actual indictment of George III. One of the Bill of Particulars is they have sent out armies of officials to eat up our wealth. And that, I just think 87,000 IRS agents. So your friends who are Democrats, I know you got some friends who are Democrats. I got friends. I was talking to one last night, my college roommate, longtime Democratic friend, saying, you know, Democrats are bent on self-destruct. Elaine Luria cannot win re-election, having cut the defense budget by inflation alone and having 87,000 IRS agents. She got a vote for that this week. Every Democrat in a tough district is being forced to vote on the IRS Expansion Act. Will any of them defect? Will they? Because they did this for Henry Waxman 10 years ago. They voted for his idiotic climate bill then, and now they're going to vote for a climate bill that helps people in our income bracket buy EVs. Do you think they're actually going to do that 9 weeks before an election?
It's Pelosi seems to be marching them off the cliff right now. And even the New York Democrats and the other Salt State Democrats who drew a line in the sand and said, we're not going to vote for anything.
Would you explain that again? We got Steelers fans listening, and they're not on peyote. Right. So you could explain salt states?
The state and local state and local tax deduction, something we capped or effectively got rid of, depending on what state you live in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, with the intent of stopping the subsidization of high tax progressive states. Obviously, all the members from high tax progressive states objected to that. And so they said, well, we want to eliminate that provision, go back to the status quo pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But even the moderate members who drew that line in the sand have now caved to Speaker Pelosi. So with the possible exception of maybe Jared Golden, I think she's going to have all her members vote for this come Friday, which is remarkable. And just the chutzpah of calling it the Inflation Reduction Act is something that astounds me, when this will obviously have an inflationary impact at a time when Americans can't afford inflation. I mean, connect that to the IRS. We're talking a $90 billion slush fund for the IRS, in addition to 87,000 new IRS agents. The whole thing is absolutely insane. And I don't know if they recognize that they're headed for an absolute disaster in November, and so they're just trying to get everything done and spend all the money possible, or they honestly believe that the so-called Inflation Reduction, Give Everybody a Free Tesla Act is going to improve their electoral prospects in November. I don't know.
Please go to the conference. Please go to the conference and say, look, we can call it whatever we want, but we all got to call it the same thing. I would call it the IRS Expansion Act, but you can call it the Teslas in every garage act if you want. But call it the same thing, so that the Senate Republicans did a good job messaging. We got to get that done. Now, I got to ask you about Trump and Mar-a-Lago. I think they basically supercharged his reelection campaign on Monday night. If the president wants to run, and they made him angry as a hornet, although it gave great publicity to Mar-a-Lago, looks beautiful in all the pictures from the helicopters. What do you think? What did that do to the American people? It's never happened in the history of the Republic. 1 minute.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, your stay at Mar-a-Lago promises to come with lots of adventure. Yeah, listen, I thought it was interesting that even the 2024 rivals of Trump went out there and condemned the raid and defended the president. And I think it shows how beyond the pale this is. Listen, they better have, I mean, if they don't have the goods here, they've opened a Pandora's box that they are not going to be able to close. And I agree.
Did the House Intelligence Committee,
what's that?
Just a quick question. As a matter of fact, did the House Intelligence Committee see the affidavit that backs up the warrant? Because it has to do with allegedly classified information being mishandled, which that would fall under your purview, right?
It would, and Ranking Member Turner sent a letter to Wray asking him to immediately brief us, which to my knowledge he hasn't. I've seen no such document. It's possible others have, since we have not been in session, but I don't think so, Hugh.
Thank you, Congressman Gallagher. Peyote-powered Packers, P-cubed. Be well, Congressman. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Brian Wesbury is with me. Normally I talk macroeconomic issues. Today I'm going to talk with Brian, who is the chief economist at First Trust Portfolio, about a microeconomic issue, the cost of audits, because 87,000 new IRS agents is not a wonderful opportunity to increase federal revenues. It's actually a nightmare for a country teetering on or in recession. Brian, do you agree with me on that? 87,000 new IRS agents. What does that do to the economy?
Oh, it is a complete and utter waste of resources complying with government rules and regulations. You know, for years, people like Jack Kemp and Dick Armey, God rest their souls, and Ronald Reagan and many, many other politicians have talked about a flat tax where, you could literally fill out your taxes on a postcard. And what we have done is gone the complete opposite way. You know, every year we hear of these stories where even the New York Times, Washington Post, they go interview CPAs and they do certain people's taxes, and then they turn them in, and they always have errors. And the reason they have errors is because the system is so complicated. And so when you put auditors in a system that nobody, even the professionals, can get right every single time, it's a recipe for disaster, and it will completely suck up resources that have nothing to do with the production of goods and services and making anyone's life better.
Now, Brian, the IRS agents, the Democrats said that IRS agents testify that for every dollar spent on IRS enforcement, they bring in $10 in revenue. I don't know if that's true, but that's beside the point. If the cost of the audit to the country and the economy is greater than the $10 of revenue they bring in, that's the real question, is what does it do to the economy?
Yeah, first of all, I don't believe that number at all. Second of all, it eats up resources that could be used for something else. You know, we keep hearing all the time about how, you know, it's for the kids, it's for the poor. Well, here are resources that are being utilized. We could design a taxation system that is much more efficient, much less costly, and could lead to a reduction in the number of IRS agents. Instead, we make it more complicated, and we need more oversight and more regulation, and we just suck up people's times. You know, in the end, people will pay. I'll pay. Anybody. I'm not against society or paying taxes. People will pay up to the amount that they feel that they get back. Like, what does our government give us, and how much are we willing to pay? And the more costly we make it through either regulation, audits, the actual tax levels, the more costly we make it to be a member of society, the fewer people will truly want to be a member of society. And this
I got to ask you, Brian, given the advances in technology, given that the IRS gets billions of dollars, shouldn't they have automated a lot of it? Because it just seems to me that AI, if Google can figure out which ads to send me, if Facebook or someone can hear me because I've signed a terms of consent, 5% of apps allow the app operator to actually turn on your phone and listen. That's why you get targeted ads. You mentioned a mortuary in a room full of people, and everyone will find out where they're going to get buried because the app in the room gets. If they can do that, why can't the IRS do that with fewer people?
Yeah, you know what? I guess my simple answer is they don't want to. They'd rather harass people. I mean, I hate to sound like that, but the point I'm getting to here is we know we could design a tax system. It's already been designed. It's been floated. I mean, I've written bills when I worked in Congress to put in a flat tax. It's the simplest thing in the world. You could do your taxes on a postcard. If we really wanted to do it, we could change it to a national sales tax and get rid of the income tax completely. And then you only pay taxes when you spend. And all of this would be really, really simple. I don't want the IRS listening to me. I don't want the IRS, coming after me and saying, hey, you sent $700 to your kid. What was that for? And I'm like, well, they're in college. Like, no, it's a taxable event. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm saying, you have to fight. We're going to have to fight everything. And anyway, all that does from an economic perspective is suck up resources into regulation, if you will, into the bureaucracy. And when somebody who mows your lawn and puts chemicals down has to fill out 22 pieces of paper in order to carry that chemical around in their truck, it's a waste of resources.
Oh my goodness. And that's what, by the way, Liz Truss is promising to fix that in Great Britain. I think whoever runs for president in 2024 has got to make it keynote that the IRS expansion has to be rolled back. And indeed, everyone running right now has to do that like Lindsey Graham did yesterday. Brian Wesbury at Wesbury, Wesbury on Twitter. First Trust Portfolio in Chicago. Thank you, my friend. I'll be right back. Hour 3 of the Wednesday edition.